And joining me to talk more about the legal implications of all of this is Joe Moreno, former federal prosecutor, and Ty Cobb, a White House lawyer during the Trump administration. And Joe, a familiar face on the program, if I could start with you. We've talked about how this indictment relates, as far as we know at this stage, to hush money paid to Stormy Daniels. But can you explain to us kind of the crimes that we might learn about in terms of when this indictment is unsealed? What exactly is it, the kind of legal jeopardy here in this case?
Sure, Michelle. So to your point, right, the indictment has not been unsealed. So pretty much everything we're talking about is a lot of speculation. That being said, based on what we think we know, this relates to accounting entries reimbursing Donald Trump's lawyer. This is, again, pre-presidential time, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement with Ms. Daniels. The problem with that is that the way, allegedly, it was accounted for, it was not accurate. And further, the theory could go that it was done in that way because it was kept from wanting to be disclosed just days before the 2016 presidential campaign. And therefore, it was effectively a campaign contribution.
So two things here, falsification of documents and then campaign finance laws at stake here. And that second one is the more serious, is that correct?
Well, I mean, that's where this gets a little dicey because campaign finance laws are federal laws. This is a state-level case. And so, again, based on what we think we know, the prosecution theory has to effectively tie the accounting problem with the campaign finance problem. That's what would potentially make it a felony, and that would, we think, be the prosecution's theory.
Ty Cobb, if I could bring you in here, were you surprised that this indictment was brought first, given that Donald Trump faces other potential legal woes on the horizon?
Not really. I think it's unfortunate that it was brought first, but the district attorney in New York has a serious statute of limitations problem in this case that is going to have to be litigated. I understand they have arguments that, may be persuasive as to why this is within the statute of limitations. All the underlying misdemeanors at the heart of the case are outside of the statute of limitations, and the issue will be whether the felonies committed in 2017 and 18, to the extent there were payments that extended into 18, the issue will be, are those actually within the 5-year statute of limitations? And I think the answer to that is anybody's guess. Now, that may not be fully resolved until appeal, but I do think I'm not surprised that this case was brought first. I think it's unfortunate this case was brought at all, not only first, because I think, as even Andrew Cuomo said, this is all politics, criticizing his own party and the Democratic district attorney. I think there are polls in the United States with which Joe's familiar that show that over 60% of the people in the country believed it was political motivated, including a third of Democrats. So I think it's discouraging, particularly because it's so inconsequential. He will never go to jail on this, and the fines that he faces are minimal.
And do you think the fact that it was wise for him not to testify before the grand jury, given where we are today?
Well, certainly based on the last 24 hours of comments by him, yeah, I think that was a good idea. I don't think anybody would have let him walk into that perjury trap if they could have avoided it. And sadly, his lawyers have the challenge of trying to keep him from talking about a case, which is standard procedure, even though he's running for president. I think that's unfortunate. Just like Cohen. Cohen is still, making news and going on TV with his lawyer, who also wants the exposure. I think both of those are mistakes too.
Yeah. It's fascinating. This is a case where we're hearing from all of the kind of central players in this. Stormy Daniels speaking publicly, Donald Trump, and also Michael Cohen. I'm curious about your thoughts on this, Joe. What does that make it more difficult for the legal teams involved?
Well, it makes it very political, Michelle. I mean, normally the most basic rule is no talking about a case, whether you're the defendant, whether you're witnesses, whether your attorney's involved. So that makes it already very strange. We also, though, the whole grand jury process that we've heard about these last few weeks, that's supposed to be a secret process. We should not know basically any of this information. We should not know that there was an indictment until it's actually unsealed. So there's a lot of logistical difficulties from all sides here, too. I think there's fault to go around from the DA's office, which is clearly leaking to the New York Times and other venues. President Trump's not going to be on his heels, so he's going to seize the opportunity here. And we've heard from witnesses in this case, so it's a big mess.
And if I might, Michelle, just
quick one to tie.
Everybody's behaving bad.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's no reason for the House Republican chairs to try to pressure brag. That's bad form. The Republican candidates, have lined up in support of, Trump and kiss the ring quickly. I don't think that's good for. I don't think that's good for the country either. And I think that the rule of law is being used in a way that just exposes, so many frailties in America from the Republicans, the Democrats, who are out there saying, the law should apply equally to every person. When, as Joe Tacopina said, and you played it, the reality is the only person in the world who would be charged with this crime is Donald Trump. So I think at the end of the day, nobody looks.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but thank you to both of you clearly making that point that you can't separate the legal from the political in this particular case.